Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another Medical Monday and a brand new episode of Should You Take That Case? As always, the goal of our show is to be a resource for legal professionals who pursue medical or medically related cases by sharing their experiences and insights as plaintiff or defense attorneys. It's me, your host, Lisa Wade, friendly neighborhood legal nurse consultant, owner of Wade Nurse Consultants, and creator of the LinkedIn community attorney medical record resource group. That is where we get all of our wonderful attorney guests. We use this as an opportunity to get to know one another, and we're going to do that today with our guest, Alexander Knapp. But we're going to wait just a few minutes and we're going to scoot over to the comments section and see if anybody is visiting us live today. If you are an attorney, put an A into that chat so we can see you. If you're a paralegal, put a P. If you are a legal assistant, put an LA. But if you are a part of a group that I find near and dear to my heart, Women Owned Law, put a W inside of that chat. Women Owned Law, it is a groundbreaking group created to connect and advance women legal entrepreneurs. So visit us at womenownedlaw.org and see if that is a group that you can get behind. Now, if you're catching us live, wonderful. Uh, I'd like to thank all of you who are catching us live and taking all the precious time out of your busy days. Thanks for coming and being with us. And now I'm going to bring out, and he's going to introduce himself, Alexander Knapp Esquire from Tampa, Florida. And there you are, Alex. Thanks for coming.
Hey Lisa, thank you very much for having me. Like you said, I my name's Alex Knapp. I'm a personal injury attorney from Tampa, Florida. I'm actually a lifelong Tampa resident. I've been practicing personal injury for about 8 years, and I just opened up my own firm back in September of 2021. So I been doing this for a while, but I've just recently started doing it completely on my own.
Oh, well, congratulations to you. A brave feat.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, we are going to definitely ask you about how medical records maybe shows and pops up during your litigations. But first, we want to hear a little bit more about you, about how you got into this particular branch of law, or how you got to be an attorney at all from the beginning. Go as far back as you like.
Sure. So my story is kind of interesting. I mean, I guess everyone's story is a little bit interesting to them. I was 8 years old, and my parents took me out on a vacation, and we were going to dinner with a family friend, and we met this gentleman who owned his own construction only law firm in Washington D.C. And he just seemed like the coolest guy. He had it all figured out. He had a great life, great family. He owned his own firm. I mean, granted, it was a massive firm, but he owned his own firm. And at that, being 8 years old, that just all seemed really cool to me. So that was it. I decided I'm going to be a lawyer. I knew I would go to law school. I, had an idea of like where I wanted to go and all that kind of stuff from a very, very young age. And I never really kind of faltered from that. There are quotes in my like high school yearbook about how I'm going to be a lawyer. I mean, it was just kind of always known. So I never really even entertained any other thoughts. It was just always going to be, I'm going to be a lawyer, even though, ironically enough, I was better at math, which is funny because, people always say that lawyers are terrible at math. So
Oh,
I decided, going to be a lawyer. Graduate college. I got into Boston University, which was the best law school that I got into. And that's, all I wanted was to go to the best school I could go to. So I left Florida for the first time in my life, went to Boston University, went to law school there, had a amazing 3 years learning from some of the best professors in America. And at the end of my time, it just made sense for my family and my girlfriend. I moved back home to start up my practice and start up my life. But it was right at the end of the financial crisis. It's 2010,
Oh.
and I was coming from a law school that was out of the state, so I wasn't as set up, to find a career as I would have hoped. Eventually, I got a job working for an insurance defense firm that primarily defended State Farm and Travelers, and what we did is like auto insurance defense, like auto accidents, as well as PIP defense. So I don't, obviously this is really kind of in the weeds, but in the state of Florida, there's a big area of law that is personal injury protection litigation. So personal injury protection is a type of insurance that's on every auto insurance policy. Basically by law, there's a contractual rate the insurance companies are required to pay for any particular code that's associated with any type of treatment with any kind of billing. Well, they don't necessarily always pay it correctly, or maybe they do pay it correctly, but they don't pay it timely, or they might say that the benefits were used up, but they didn't use them up in the right way. So there's all these issues that you would, a medical doctor would say, well, I wasn't paid properly. They hire a lawyer. The lawyer goes out to try and get that money back. And I worked for insurance companies defending those kinds of claims, basically saying either we did pay properly or we were correct in not choosing not to pay, that sort of thing, along with learning how to do auto accident cases.
Okay.
So I did that for about a year. I worked for a like janitorial company for about a year, kind of working in claims, so to speak, about people that were injured at places that my company had cleaned. And then I got back into working insurance defense with another firm, again, private firm. So I worked for a bunch of different insurance companies, but I got to see a lot of different insurance companies how they handled their attorneys and their litigation and that sort of thing. So I got a lot of lit experience, but I got also a lot of experience just seeing that insurance companies didn't really respect my clients' cases, so they didn't respect my bill. They really just kind of ran roughshod over everyone, and eventually it got to the point where I was really unhappy with the work I was doing, meaning I wasn't happy taking people that I felt were actually injured and telling them they weren't, or kind of fighting them down and getting them to take offers that maybe they weren't that fair. So I made the decision that I was going to get out of the defense world and switch sides, go to the plaintiff side, and I started sending out resumes, and I came across this medium sized personal injury firm over in Clearwater. They did personal injury, and they also did personal injury protection, which I had some experience in. So I came in, I started working with their personal injury protection department, and I started learning how they like to build plaintiff PI cases, which you may or may not know is very, very, very different than litigating defense PI cases, because in the defense world, by the time the case comes to you, it's 6 months old, it's 12 months old, it's 18 months old. It's very kind of static in where it's going. However, when you get a personal injury case from the plaintiff's perspective, I get clients that are hours removed from their crash, a few days
Hmm.
removed from their crash. There's not a lot of information that we have to go on as far as what their injuries are at that point. It's really kind of who are you as a person? What kind of facts do we have? What does the three legs of the stool of a tort case? What does that look like? And is this going to be a story I can tell that's going to make a lot of sense? And are you a person that I think I can help? Because sometimes people come to me that I simply there's nothing I can do for them, whether it's because they maybe have the wrong motives, or they're not injured, or they've missed something about their case that makes it to where it's not a winner. That happens too. So it's a very different world. And I spent quite a while there. Not long after I was there, I stopped doing the personal injury protection. I found a young, hungry attorney to come in and kind of take that over, and I just oversaw his department, and I just primarily worked on our plaintiff PI cases. And I had an amazing 6-year run at that firm. I learned amazing things from one of the attorneys I think is probably the best at how to build a personal injury plaintiff's case in the strongest way. So I picked up a lot, and then the pandemic hit and the world got crazy, and it made sense for me to leave. I went to a different firm where I worked in plaintiff, same exact thing I'd always done, plaintiff personal injury, but without all of the firm operations stuff I'd done before. I thought it would be a good fit. Turned out it just personally was not. So we parted ways, and that is how I came to open up my own firm, which, like I said, it was last September that we opened, but it has been, the best decision we've ever made.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And now you're in the driver's seat now for all of these cases. This is your this is your baby. is there anything different that goes into how you decide whether a case is good to take or not good, or if you should refer it out, or if it's not a case at all?
So I get to do a much more fluid, personal to me analysis on what cases I'm going to take and what cases I'm going to refer out and what my strategy is going to be because it's me. So, the two places I worked at before, one, we had a fairly large intake, you know, process, and we would bring in, quite a few cases a month to the point where one person couldn't possibly review all of them on the front end because plaintiff personal injury is incredibly competitive. So if you leave someone on hold or you tell them you'll get back to them, they'll find another attorney. They'll find someone that will take their case, and then you can miss out on a really good case, a really good opportunity. So what you're kind of in a position to want to do is if a case comes to you and it satisfies, let's call it the bare minimum, you'll just take it, you bring it in, and then you'll figure it out afterwards. Because even if, as long as there's nothing too terrible about it, you can build a strong case by making sure that your clients say the right things to the right doctors, they see the right doctors, that sort of thing. They avoid the pitfalls that insurance companies like to try to lead them to. So, a case comes in when you're at a bigger firm, either you have no say whatsoever, which I experienced once where just cases just came in and someone had already decided that's going to be your case and you're going to work on it. Or, you have a little bit of say, but it's kind of after the fact. Now, since it's my show, it's my baby, as you say. I handle upfront intake. First initial phone call is almost always with me, so I know the things I want to know in order to evaluate a case. And if it's a case where this is one where I think I can make a PI case out of it, and there's another component, okay, well then I'm going to take this the PI portion and I make it very clear to the client. But there's some portion of this that it's not something I handle. I've got someone out there that I think would be great for you. If you're okay with it, I'm going to have give you their number and you can reach out to them and they will handle that aspect. I can kind of customize it that way because in the past, one of the things that I learned that I'm trying to unlearn is sometimes people get in accidents and they get hurt and they don't go to the doctor right away. I mean, it happens a shockingly high amount of the time. For a number of reasons. They don't have transportation. They don't know they can. They think they don't have insurance.
Mm.
You name it. Or they just straight up don't have insurance and they don't understand the fact that the other person might have coverage that could protect them. So they just won't go to the doctor. And then their pain will get, out of control and they will see one of my advertisements and they will come to me, via social media, what have you.
Mm.
And then I can speak to them and, we can kind of go from there. Um, I've had to learn, now that I'm on my own, how to be a little bit more lenient on some of the cases I would take. So in the past, it was if a client hadn't treated within a certain amount of time, like that was just not going to be a case that we as a firm were going to expend a lot of energy on. What I've learned is that, there might still be people I can help, even if they, as long as we go in both knowing that the recovery may not be anything spectacular, but hey, I might be able to give you some treatment, might be able to help you feel better, and maybe we can help get some of these bills paid for, and we're both on the same page from the beginning, then it's still a case I can do, I can help, and I can take. That's something that I've been able to kind of mold around my new situation, which has been nice.
Ah, excellent, excellent. Now, let's say you've decided or in your process of deciding if you should take that case, and the records start coming in, or as few or as many as is appropriate. When those records uh, come your way, hit your office, is there a special protocol or a way you dive into them to get all the information that you
So,
need?
so obviously every case is a little bit different, and medical offices being run the way they are, they don't necessarily come in the way you'd want them to, and the pace is always kind of an issue. So if I have a client that treats with 4 doctors that I know really well, I can get their records at any moment and I can get them set up in my system and I can review them all in chronological order and it's beautiful and I can tell the story as I go along. But sometimes you get a client that's 6 months into their accident, they went to the hospital and maybe they went to a hospital that's not as good about responding to records requests. So you have a time delay on that. Then they went to a chiropractor that maybe a friend recommended them to, or they went to physical therapy. with someone that you don't really know, and then somewhere along the way they saw some specialists, and all of these offices kind of have different ways that they handle their records requests and responding to getting records out. And you send out your records requests to all of them, and they don't come in any kind of particular order. So, and they could take 30 days or they could take a day. So what I often find is, while my caseload isn't huge, my firm is still small. I can't depend on, oh, you know what, these records are going to come in some kind of timely fashion. Usually, when records come in, I make sure I file them properly in their cases at any given time, and I continue working on what I'm working on. But when it's time for me to do a file review, which is just something I learned, when I was coming up, learning how to do PI, it's just kind of a daily ritual where I grab my files and I open them up and I start picking my way through them. When I do my file review and I reach a file that's got, let's say a sufficient amount of the medical records in there, I will open them up and I will start working my way through. So I always try to work, if I can't work chronological, because obviously that can get hard sometimes when you have people seeing different doctors and different specialists in overlapping time periods. I try to work in a relatively consistent pattern of initial emergency care, uh, conservative care, diagnostic study, specialist, and I try and work my way through that way. So if I have a client that has gone to a hospital, a chiropractor, had an MRI, saw a doctor for injections, and then has seen a surgeon, I will try to review the records in that order. And I will just, when I'm keeping my handwritten notes on this, I will make sure to note that there's an overlap so that I can get a proper chronology for when I'm building my demand out later on. That I recall that, you know what, on April 12th, she saw this doctor and he, performed an injection. And then on April 29th, she saw this doctor, different doctor, and he recommended her for surgery. And then on May 15th, she saw this doctor and he performed, the interventional doctor, and he performed another injection. I make sure that even though I'm not reading those in that order, I've got them chronologized, a chronology, so that I remember that happened that way. Because even though it may not be a huge thing, like adjusters are oftentimes just typing stuff into Colossus and seeing what gets spit out. To tell a story, especially in litigation, you have to know these things, because you could easily lose grip on the tale you're telling, like what your client's experience has been like.
Hmm. All right. Well, it sounds like the rate or pace at which records come in could be vary, to say the least, and that does seem bothersome. But is there any other pet peeves you have, maybe when you're
Well,
reading or dealing with those medical records, that is
Well, it's
most
certain,
annoying?
obviously different people take records request to mean one thing, and another different types of doctors take it to mean another. So some people will give you the entire chart, including prescriptions that they write, referral emails that they've sent, and that sort of thing. And other people will just send you the office notes. And neither one is wrong. Just sometimes they can make things a little bit tricky from a packaging perspective, like how I'm going to break these down. The other problem I run into, I find a lot, is handwritten notes that go into medical records. Sometimes the entire medical record, is just the handwritten notes of the doctor. There's no, uh, there's no dictation. There's no typing. It's just simply handwritten notes, and then you run into the old cliche about doctor's handwriting. So I've had people where I've got a chart in front of me, and there's diagnosis codes, and they're circled. The circle is really big, so I have to decipher between the circle that's circled two different CPT codes which one he actually means based on his handwritten note next to it. So I don't know if it's M5401 or M5402. I got to figure it out, and then I got to go look at the chart to try and piece it together. That's something that can get frustrating, is when some offices just haven't moved into the 21st century and are not using I don't know, keyboards of any sort, and so the records you get look like just hieroglyphics that are being sent over your way. That's definitely one that sticks in my crawl a little bit.
Oh, what you have given a whole lot of good details and good information about how you're managing your cases, and I'm just trying to see if you have any final tips or suggestions that you haven't covered, maybe for newbie or even veteran attorneys, for what should go into them deciding to take these cases that come across their desk.
So if I was to sit down with a brand new baby lawyer that was thinking about starting his own firm, I would tell him or her, know that there is a very good chance that when you get started, you're not going to have medical records when the case begins. That's just the nature of this business. It's the nature of how these cases work. If you wait till the time you can get the medical records, you might lose the case. So you're oftentimes going to take the case and you're going to start building it blind to what has come before your representation. All I can tell you in those scenarios is get your records requests out day one so that they start filtering in. Calendar for 2 weeks, 3 weeks from the date that you send it out so that you can follow up, because you'd be surprised how often that your records requests to large entities disappear. Hospitals down here are some of the biggest, most notorious ones where they only accept via mail. If you send some other way, you'll just never get your response. And they won't even respond to tell you that you sent it the wrong way. So calendaring so that you know to follow up on your record so that you don't come back in 90 days and you, wait, I don't have a hospital record. What the heck happened here? Um, you have to have a system for follow up. I used to use a case management system called Client Profiles Total Office that was amazing. When you drafted a records request, it would calendar for you 3 weeks out, follow up on that records request so that then when you showed up on the date 3 weeks later, there'd be a to do to check and see if those records have come in. If they have, you delete the to do, you move on. If they haven't, you do whatever your follow up step is. So if I was talking to someone that was thinking of doing this, or was getting into PI, or frankly even worked at someone else's firm, I would want to talk to them about what are your procedures, what is your kind of like time lag that you allow, how quickly are you getting your requests out, and how quickly are you following up on them? Because I mean, you can imagine, as whether it's PI, workers' compensation, medical malpractice, the actual records are, I mean, they're what our case is based on. I explain this to clients all the time. You can tell me how hurt you are and I will believe you, but no one else is going to. If you don't have a piece of paper that explains what your injuries are, and you're not seeing it, it's like it's like you're not hurt at all, because insurance companies take the position that you're lying no matter what. So that record it's exactly that. It's proof. It's a record of your injuries, of your pain, of your subjective complaints, and of your objective findings. So we as the attorney, it's our responsibility to go around and collect that, because frankly, most people don't have the first clue about what's even in their medical records. I talked to my wife the other day. She has lupus, and she was talking about her doctors, and I said, well, I'd love to see the record. She goes, I don't think they keep records. I said, sweetheart, they have to. For them to bill health insurance, for them to do all these things, like the things I collect all day, they're not just doing that just because it's me. All doctors have to do it. Like it's there. It exists. They don't get paid without it. So the records process, the collection of records, is of critical importance if you're going to start a firm, or if you're just already in a firm and you're struggling, or sometimes, I mean, if you work at a dinosaur and they have a antiquated way of doing it, there are a number of ways you can improve that process and you can speed it up. And um, that's kind of speed is kind of one of the things that's like one of my core tenets. So it's one of the things that I pride myself on. So doing things quickly and efficiently and effectively is kind of like my number one priority. It's kind of what I use to set me apart from a lot of the people that I find myself in competition with. So what that means is you have to have a streamlined process for exactly this. You can't just be sitting around thinking, well, I sent the request, it's been 30 days, I mean, I guess they'll get it to me. There has to be, you have to have some kind of a tickler. You have to have some kind of a content. What's my next step? Do I mean, heck, if you have to ask your client to go get them, like there just has to be a process.
Excellent. You you are wonderful for giving really good actionable tips that help the folks keep their tame their medical records. That's what that's what you do.
Well,
Excellent.
that's the thing. I was going to say this earlier, and I think I got sidetracked on myself, and I apologize for interrupting you, Lisa.
No problem.
Um, everyone does it different. So you could have a surgeon, you could have two orthopedic surgeons that the way that the system that they use to maintain their records, the form on which they put their records in looks completely different, and it comes out and it gets spit out completely different, and the information contained within, even though it should be the same, may not be exactly the same. So you also, one of the things is when you're doing this, and when you're doing personal injury, at least, and you're working with a lot of the same providers consistently, you need to get to where what your records are going to look like, so that when something's missing, you can catch it. And if something's in there that shouldn't be in there, you can catch it as well. Not because you can do anything to change the record, but you need to know. You cannot walk around assuming that something is or is not going to be in there when it very well could be. So you have to know like what your records, what to expect, what they look like, backwards and forwards, so that you don't get caught by something that you missed.
All right. That excellent. Like I said, very good information, good advice. It's something that I do as a legal nurse consultant. You
Oh,
know,
sure,
things look a lot different from place to place, but it's nice to know and have that understanding of what's going on, no matter what it looks like. So
for sure.
that's good. Well, now I want to thank you for coming and being with us.
Thank you very much for having me, Lisa.
Wonderful. And now is the point where we have a time for a little Q&A, if that's something that you're ready to do.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have folks, if you're out there and you are listening to us live, it's time to get ready to get your questions together and place them into the chat, and Alex is going to answer them. And but while you're getting those questions together, it's time for what I call a sponsor break. So I can tell you really quickly a little bit about Wade Nurse Consultants and what we do here. And we'll be right back to Alex. Without a review and summary of the medical records, it might be harder as a PI or med mal attorney to know if you should take a case. And here at Wade Nurse Consultants, we give a 1 to 2 page synopsis and opinion regarding the merits of those medical or medically related cases. By using my 30 plus years of nursing experience to make quick work of those medical case screenings. So if you're watching this and you already have your nurse paralegal on the payroll, this isn't for you. But if you do have a backlog of cases to screen, or you have to get clarity on some medical issues that you might not be familiar with, and you need to free yourself to focus on your legal strategies, here's what you do next. Right now, we're offering at Wade Nurse Consultants a free 20-minute medical records strategy call to help you hone an efficient, timely, and cost effective routine around your medical cases or medical records. Inside the description box of this YouTube channel, you'll find a link. Hit that link and schedule a consultation. And now it's time to get back to Alex and our Q&A. Let's take a peek, Alex. Let's see. Do we have any questions yet? No. But let me just tell you, that happens sometimes.
Sure.
And this is how we deal with it. What I'll do is put your contact number inside the description box of this YouTube channel, and I will leave it there for people who are catching on the replay and they have some questions for you. They can reach out to you with those questions 1 to 1. How's that sound?
Sounds fine.
All right. And since I don't see any questions coming across live today, I think we're going to wind up, if that's all right with you.
All
But
right.
I have one question for you, Alex.
Okay, fire away.
Will you come back again another time?
If I'm invited, I will always come back. Absolutely.
Excellent. That's good. It's a good plan. So now, like I said, we're going to wind up this episode. And I just have a few reminders out there for people that are catching us live or on the replay. Like this show, subscribe to this channel. And if you have any legal nurse consulting questions, reach out to me at our website, wadenurseconsultants.com, right there, or my email, lisa at wadenurseconsultants.com. And for now, come back, catch us again next week, and a brand new episode, Monday, 5:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a new episode of Should You Take That Case? Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.